Hello and welcome to the fourth installment of our webinar series. Today we put BIM into practice. Lots to do, so let's take a look.
Building Information Modeling, or BIM for short, is a wonderful tool to create great architecture. Unfortunately, many might believe that BIM is out of their reach. This is because adapting from 2D drafting to BIM might seem time-consuming and costly. Also, it seems that BIM means a whole new workflow and methods which you need to learn from scratch, and the new requirements and legislations may seem too complicated to follow. Our mission behind ARCHLine is to open a gateway to BIM. ARCHLine makes the transition from 2D drafting to BIM step by step. It takes you from 2D to 3D modeling and introduces BIM parameters to your workflow. Sharing your projects with other professionals is effortless. The software makes sure that you can use your already existing CAD skills, files and projects to stay competitive. The gate is now open for new challenges and previously unavailable projects. ARCHLine is an out-of-the-box IFC certified BIM software. No extra plugins are needed to complete your project because your design will contain everything in a single file. You will work together with other parties of the building industry seamlessly. Avoid misunderstandings. Use real products. Collaborate better than before. BIM is quickly becoming the standard. Make sure you are there. With ARCHLine.
My name is Zoltán. Over here is our resident architect, Mr. Illés Pap.
Hi there.
During the last few weeks, we looked at how a BIM project comes together, how you plan something from scratch, creating buildings or multi-story structures. How do we do that from the beginning? And then we looked at how to use existing documentation in your plans, how to import DXF, DWG drawings, geolocation related topics. And last time we looked at documentation issues, how to create sections, elevations. But today is when we put everything in a BIM perspective, because the title of this whole webinar series is Gateway to BIM, and today's is BIM in practice. So what are the BIM benefits for an everyday project like the one that we are working on? And if you backtrack a couple of steps, what is BIM anyway? So we are going to start with that. We are going to first talk about what BIM is, what kind of benefits it brings to your everyday workflow. And we look at a few concrete examples of how BIM could help with whatever you are doing with your software. And eventually we are going to look at how BIM can aid with your documentation. And that's what we have in stock today. Anything to add?
Well, I think we can start. One thing to note is that you can comment on the right-hand side of the screen.
That's right.
And then if you have anything to ask, please ask that, and we will answer timed in a proper position. So now I think we should first summarize kind of what is BIM, how to approach it, and what are the misconceptions regarding that.
Regarding BIM, we all know that it means building information modeling. The emphasis is on information, because now we are not only going to care about drawing things, but we also care about the data that this drawing is going to be accompanied with. This is also called the digitalization of the building industry. Now, what does that mean? It means that BIM is and could be the next step from 2D CAD to 3D CAD, and eventually we have BIM, so it's the next part in the evolution. And it's very important that BIM is not only workflow, it's also all about collaboration. You also work with other co-designers and colleagues. BIM is going to help you tremendously with that. Now, let's clarify what BIM is, and rather what BIM is not. BIM is not really one software product. Our software is a BIM software, but BIM doesn't equal to what we are doing. It means much more than that. It's a process. And it's not only 3D.
It's a big misconception that many people think BIM equals 3D. When I receive a file from someone in a BIM format from a BIM software, it's automatically 3D. Well, partially it's true, but that's not the whole point. That you actually communicate information. That's the idea behind. You won't communicate drawings, but you will communicate the building.
That's right. So that also means that BIM is not only about creating objects, but instead you are creating building elements. So every single thing that you create is going to have a dedicated role. You are not going to create just 3D solids and lines. You are working with walls, doors, windows, and slabs. We are going to show you later why that is relevant. And also, it's not only for the building phase, it's also for the whole life cycle of the building project.
And also, it's very important, it's not only for large projects. Mainly nowadays, perhaps it is used for large projects. It's the demand from the side of the large project makers is a bit heavier. But as you will see, we will try to demonstrate that on screen today, that you actually benefit the BIM advantages even when you work on a regular size model. When we talk about information, when we talk about collaboration, and that's the biggest point.
And we are very, so the best way to actually show what BIM entails, and this is where ARCHLine comes in, is how collaboration is going to be helped between the certain people, the stakeholders of the building project or the building life cycle. So it doesn't matter which role you are currently filling in. The point is that you can draw from the same collected information. So if you create building documentation in a BIM format, that is not going to be a closed wealth of information. Instead, it's going to be available and accessible to all the stakeholders. And we are very grateful for BIM Object, the company who's making BIM objects available to the public for this graph, because this shows beautifully how BIM is not restricted for the construction or design phase, but instead it focuses on the whole design process from beginning to end, all the way to demolishing and including facility management. Now, obviously, ARCHLine takes a big part of that, but you might say that you're only designing the buildings. You don't care about facility management, or you don't care about demolishing the buildings. Yes, but the data that you create at the design phase is going to be accessible for the other stakeholders. And eventually, let's just sum up why you would need BIM. First of all, more and more organizations on a state level promote the use of BIM. And there's actually a pressure from your clients, or from clients from other countries as well, to have projects above a certain size being submitted in BIM. And this is actually applying for government orders.
Yeah, and also if you are willing to take part in these projects, if you are not BIM ready, you will actually not being able to apply to them, because that's just a base level that you need to satisfy.
That's right. So that actually means that if you are not on that level, you might miss out on important opportunities. And also, as we are going to show in a couple of seconds, there's a large amount of data already stored in BIM. So you could use all that data. There's a lot of things out there which you, as a BIM software user, could access, and that's what we are going to show in a couple of seconds.
And last but not least is the most important from my personal perspective is the collaboration. You will see that the collaboration is on a very high level when you communicate BIM projects using the IFC format which we will represent today. And for me, when I'm willing to co-work together with someone else on a project, the higher the level of the collaboration in the files, in the information, the best the collaboration is.
That's right. Now let's take a look at how a BIM project looks like. And what I'm really interested in now, Ilyes, is to see how is this project different from a line drawing? Because obviously you could do the same thing with a non-BIM software, but what are the extra steps that you do to make sure that this is a BIM project?
Yeah, well, first things first. Whatever you create in a drawing, in a building project, is information. It's not just lines. It's a wall. It's a window. It's a building element. And when you work in a BIM software, just as in ARCHLine, you create that information and you will be able to pass that information on. There are kind of hidden building informations also that are not so obvious, but these are also part of the building information, and those are, for example, the geolocation of the building, the date and time, and data like the creator and the maker and the owner of this building. These are things. Let's just start with that. These are the things that you can find in the file, and there is this BIM section, and it's called the project parameters. So when you click on that, you will find all these things like the project name, the number, the beginning date, and the building volume, and all sort of data that you can find here. These are also building information. So whenever I create this project and I fill this up, however rich I do that, when I hit OK and I send it to someone else using a BIM software, they will see this information and they will be able to carry on and pass it on to other professionals. And this information is not lost. That's the whole idea behind the life cycle of this project. We'll keep this information. Now, talking about these building informations. Now, I talked about the, for example, the project level. This is, we can say that the largest level information is where this building is located and what are the tags for this project. But there is also something like obviously the floor system. This is also building information. If there is no information about the floors or something like that, someone else cannot reconstruct it, cannot build this building up. So this is also part of the building information. Whenever I export this file, this project into a specific format, in a BIM format, they will be able to see that and edit that.
What about information stored on an element level?
Well, those are things that whenever you create a wall, let's just start with the wall because that's kind of an obvious start here. If you select a wall, before you draw that wall or after you already created, you will always find a BIM parameter here. This, when you click there, you will see that this certain element, this wall, has a few kind of groups of information particles that you can find, edit, and you can even add extra information. Like let's be a bit more specific here. For example, in case of a wall, I know that I would like to use this wall also for example, for energetic calculations, and I don't have information about that here now, but somehow I would like to store that information, like what's the U value of this this whole wall here. So I can also add parameters. I'm not only editing or checking these parameters, but I can also add the new parameter, and I can tell that, for example, this new value, it's a completely new value that I'm creating now, is for example the U value here. And I can also tell what was the value for this, and let's just say it's, I don't know, 1.1. And I can also add some description here. I can also set up the type of this information, and I can also set up the discipline. This is kind of the grouping of this whole thing. And when I say OK, it's automatically added. And whenever I save this project, I pass it on to someone else, they will see the same information stored here. Whatever software they use, the whole point is that if they use a BIM software, they will be able to see this information.
So it would be retrievable.
Yeah.
Now let's look at the exact example of where the BIM workflow comes in, because so far we talked about storing information, but what about bringing in information into the plan? I think the first step would be the BIM Object and Element Libraries.
Yeah, well, if you are about to enrich your model with any sort of data from certain libraries, you will likely go to those libraries that you can find here. Either here, the 3D warehouse is a popular option, but those are not BIM objects. Those are just objects. They're only the material, the surfaces, and how the object looks like, but there's no extra information stored in it like price or maker or anything else. If you're willing to use real-world data, and that's another key point of the BIM ideology, and if you would like to use real products, real-world data, then you can go to the BIM libraries, and in the BIM libraries you will be able to find, this is the first option here, which is the BIM Object app here. If you click on that, you will be prompted to log in. It's appearing on the other screen. Just give me a second while I'm logging in. And then when you're logged in, let me just bring that back on screen here. So this is what happens when you click on that option. It opens this built-in browser, and that's the BIM Object Portal. We are actually logged in with your login.
Yes.
And now we can start browsing. This is hundreds of thousands of items from makers all around the world that you can find here.
It's very important that we always suggest to customers not to rely on only the built-in libraries that the software is shipped with, because the industry is changing so fast that we are not able to keep up with it. But luckily we have organizations such as BIM Object or Cadenas or the other players that we have in our software which keep up with these changes. So you can always find relevant and up-to-date objects in these libraries, especially because if any of these products would be obsolete, they are going to be updated by the manufacturer. So you can be 100% sure that whatever you find here is relevant data.
Yeah, that's right. So how to use that? Well, the layout is quite simple. You will be able to see those groups of things like plumbing and, I don't know, kitchenware and flooring. And let's just go with the door now. I'm willing to show you how to use a door. So whenever you click on a category, it comes up with, as you can see, tons of items that you can find there, and brands that you can just browse through their catalogs, their online catalogs. And then also there are filters at the left-hand side, just as in case of, if you're familiar with the non-BIM library, the warehouse, there's also a filter for there, like a search field and so on. This is quite similar. So you just go and find a category, filter it if you want. I think I tried to find this sliding door category, so I'm just narrowing my search. Also, actually here, there's this BIM board, which is like the favorites list. We actually already stored some of our favorites, but let's just go with these here. So I'm just browsing through. I'm looking for a sliding door. I mean, actually it's a revolving door. Yes. So that's what I'm looking for. And I'm willing to find a specific maker with a specific type, and this is what I'm willing to download now. So I click on that one. And it brings up the product page. So this is what you see when you open up the product page of this specific door from this specific maker. You will see a description, some additional data, and for me now is the most important thing that I can also of course download this. Now this little number there was how many formats are available. In case of ARCHLine, you will also be able to download things in several formats, but if you would like to download something in 3D like an object or something like that, you should go with the RFA, for example. Now,
otherwise you might have more than one file format supported.
Yeah. Sometimes there is, like, for example, you can download the PDF or something like that. But in this specific case, I'm just simply downloading the RFA file. And then what happens, ARCHLine actually saves this current status of this original project, if I was already working on something, opens up a new kind of a workshop board or something like that, a new project. And when I click OK, the software imports there, and then I can decide what I'm willing to do with that thing that I have downloaded. So now what I did, I just created a copy of that item from the BIM Object library. And then sometimes this happens, and I think this is a good example what you will face up with in this object catalog. Sometimes there is not just one single representation of one item, but for example, this door comes with 4-panel and the 3-panel layout, and I need to now clear it up. So until I do that, you can explain a little bit more about what we can find and how we can do that.
So like you said, now we are in an isolated view. So whatever we are doing right now is not going to have any effect whatsoever what we have done so far in the other project in that family house. But what English is doing now is that he's getting rid of all the elements that are not needed for the exact purpose that we are looking for. So he's highlighting the elements that he wants to delete or modify. And well, the numbers we don't need that as well. The handles can be gotten rid of. And when we are at this stage, we are still not saving this yet, because now we have an option to change the texture of these elements. Now, obviously, since we are working with manufactured items, it's not advised, it's not good practice to change the measurements or the dimensions, because that defies the purpose. But if you want to change the texture to something more realistic for your rendering purposes, then this is the time when you can do that. Don't forget that even though we are changing certain things on this particular object, the data that it comes with would be retrievable, but we are going to see that in a second. So now we have modified it. What do we do then?
I'm just looking around. I'm just revolving this 3D around and check whether I've forgotten something or not. And I'm actually done by editing this whole model, so I'm willing to save it as a door. And now I have this option here available where I can actually say that in the sketch mode, whatever I have downloaded, I can either turn it into an object, into a door, or a window, or I can of course later close the sketch mode. So now this here is a door. So I go to the new door option. And then the software comes up with this dialog. This is the new door window definition. By the way, we talked about this in a different topic. You can use this same method not only for BIM object items to turn them into doors, but also other regular objects.
But the point here is that while you are doing it, let me explain this. That the point here is that if we can't just accept any kind of object as it is as a door, because then the software would not know where to cut the walls should this object be placed onto a wall. So now what Ilyes is doing, he is defining the nodes, which would be the front and the back part of the door. So the software would know exactly where the door comes in and where the wall should end. So that's what we are doing right now. We are just, if we zoom in, we can see it better. Yes, so these are the nodes which would define where the hole is going to be created. So now I assume that we hit OK and then we save it, right?
And before we do that, there is also an important thing here. There's this pin here. It's actually pointing to the front of the door here, as you can see. So whatever shape you have with the door, you need to find that the boundary that has the limitation where the hole should be cut into the wall, so that just as you described here. So yes, after that I can actually set up the opening type. I have the option here to change the 2D shape if I'm willing to, but I'm fine with this one, so I'm just simply hitting OK, and I progress to the final step, which is naming this object. So to keep consistent with the original item, I usually keep the original name, but sometimes you can add something like, now I'm actually adding a word like webinar, for example, because I already have another copy.
Yes.
You can also check the category where you would like to save this, and also you can set up the subcategory. Now you should look for a category if you find it, but if you do not, then you can just simply type one, like for example I'm typing revolving now.
So do I see that now we can define the BIM parameters here as well?
Yes, and when you click on this one, you will see all those things that you just described. These information that's available on screen, it was downloaded when I clicked on the download button, and with the RFA file. This information came together with this whole door. So you can see that there are data groups, there's general identity data, and so on. So there's a whole lot of information connected to this item, not just geometry, not just material, but information.
Why are these fields red? So what does that mean? Because certain things are black, but...
Yeah. These are either calculated or not allowed to change. That's how the software highlights that. Now, actually, it seems like I can do that, but those are kind of protected values. All the others that come with black, those are things that I can edit or modify, or I can just do whatever I want with those things here.
What's the next step?
And the next step, when now I didn't change anything. I just checked whether I have everything as an information. So I just click OK, and then I just hit OK, and then this door is actually now saved into my library. If I go to the libraries and I just go to doors and check that either there is I think it was called Talos. So I go there. See, I already downloaded a bunch of them, but there's this one for the webinar.
That's the last one.
So actually, whenever I just close the sketch mode, I'm just going to close that. I will go back to the previous project where I was working on. Now, this wasn't an office building, so this revolving door won't fit the previous building. But as you can see, this is how it integrates. And when I go and use the wall tool anywhere on this drawing, let's just change the style to something quite regular, like a 38 centimeter wide wall, and then I go to the libraries. There was this outdoor, and there was this revolving, and there's my door. I just click and drag, and I can just place it just as any other item, and it appears there.
If we could just take a look at it in 3D, then we could see that the wall is actually cut where the opening is.
Yeah, that's right. So it should appear here, right next to that. Let me just highlight.
Now that we are on the stage when the project gets more and more data into it, maybe we could stop for a second to talk about managing the drawings, especially when it comes to layers, naming conventions. What can you say about that?
Well, when we named the object, there was also the option to use standard names. So let me just start with that. So whenever you turn either a door into, a door object into a door or into anything, you can use these tools, this information which is available here. Single object. Let me just go with the new object option here. And when you name anything, I didn't use this before, but when you name anything, you will have this option, the object naming protocol. When you work on larger projects, you cannot just name the things anyhow. You need to fit in the regulations and into the standard naming convention. So as you can see, ARCHLine supports that with option 1 and option 2, whichever you need to fit your project or the naming of your objects into it's supported here.
Perfect.
So that was about the objects and things treated as objects. There is another thing that could come in picture, and it's not only for the the doors and windows and objects and things like that, but for the organization, how the project itself is organized, just as you mentioned, and it's for the layers. And in case of layers, whenever you work with layers, when you create those layers, if you are not willing to create them standard named, then you're fine. You can just create a new one and name it anyhow you want. But if you would like to, and if you join to a project where it's a must to use the protocol, then you can just enable that. And when you create a new project, a new layer, then a quite similar dialog comes up, which you saw already before. But this is for the layer, so the naming is following a specific standard format here.
Yes, because to be fair, BIM is also about following some kind of convention, some kind of regulations. Otherwise, the data would not be that retrievable. And speaking of this topic, I think it's now time to talk about how do we actually carry data from one project to the other? Because so far we were importing data and creating data in this drawing. What happens if we want to store this into some kind of file format and pass it to somebody else, even if they're not using ARCHLine but another software? So what are the tools here?
Yeah, well, first things first, just as I mentioned, there are the classic formats. We talked about that last time, but those are drawings. And the whole point here is to pass on the building itself, not just the drawings. So what I'm doing now, I have this current status of the project. So I go to the file and there is this export option, and the first highlighted option is the IFC. That's the kind of the cornerstone for this purpose. I can just say that, well, let's just save it here, for example, into this specific folder, or I can go to any of the other folders stored on my computer. I think I will just quickly create one here, and I will name it IFC export. So this will be...
Yes, we mentioned it last time that if you're doing an export, don't ever do it into your desktop, because otherwise you would end up with a lot of files.
Yeah, you always should create a subfolder wherever you save it, because sometimes the files come with a lot of extra files created. So I'm just saving this and I'm naming it after the creator of this project.
Yes, and we are very grateful for this project. This is what we use so far for every single project that we did so far. So
let's just name it like this. And as you can see, there's the format. It will be an IFC file, and then I click on Save. So the software allows me to filter the output. So for example, if this is for, I don't know, structural designers or someone else that is not who is not willing to work with, I don't know, the railing or the lamps and furnishing or something like that, I can just simply disable them not to be exported. And also we talked about the project phases. ARCHLine supports the separate project phases. Those are also supported here, so you can filter which is the filter which you would like to pass on to someone else. Perhaps not the whole project, but only one specific.
Sometimes
phase.
you do that. Yes.
So I just click on OK, and then now the software collects all this information, and when it's done, as you can see here, now it's just processing the data. When it's done, the file will be created on the specific folder, and I will get a summary here which tells me what happened and how successful that was. Now, perhaps it's just not meaning anything to me, so let's see what
let's see what actually happened.
What the result was. And for that purpose, we will use a specific software. It's a free software that you can find and you can download online, and it's called the Solibri Model Viewer. Now I'm clicking on it to start it, so you will see it's actually happening on the other screen, but I will bring it here. This is a free viewer, and it's a third-party software, so it's also good for you to check the result before you pass this on to someone else, because this will show you what's the result of the exported file. So I'm just clicking on the Open Model, and I will open up the desktop, and I created this subfolder, and there's this IFC file. I click on that one, and then it opens up the model. So I'm using this for double checking before I pass it on, and what I will see here is the model itself, but now whoever will digest this data using the BIM software, the software will understand that this is actually a wall, this is actually a window, and this is actually a terrain. So if the other software has the proper tools to modify it, obviously an architectural BIM will have, then they will be able to work with that. And also the location, the site, the building, and also the floor.
Oh yes, the
floors
floor
are also exported, not just the items by themselves. We actually have a still image when we loaded this information, this IFC file in a third-party software. This is how it looked like. So this same data generated a 2D drawing in that third-party software and the 3D model as well, and the user was able to modify it and work with it like as natural walls and other things.
Just to recap what the IFC is able and not able to do. So
Yep.
IFC carries over your project with the dimensions, the site, the whole project with the models and the information. But if you want to just exchange line drawings, then you still have the DWG and DXF methods to do that. So the IFC is not the best way to carry this kind of information with it. But if you want to communicate the whole building with its information, then this is the way to go.
And in practice, it usually happens like you pass on the building, and in a several other formats, you pass on the drawing itself. If
That's
there
right.
is a highly detailed final version of the 2D, I don't know, details and anything else, then you can use both. But if you would like to pass on the building itself, if you would like to export the building and make the other person be able to edit the walls as walls and the columns as columns, you will use the IFC file.
Now it's great that you mentioned editing, because this is the next thing I want to talk about, because now we looked at the scenario when we are exporting something from ARCHLine and pass it to somebody else. But what happens if it works the other way? What happens if we receive an IFC file? How do we import that and how do we edit that?
Okay, so let's imagine we received that file. I actually have a file here prepared for that purpose, and this is actually a sample project of that specific third-party maker who we use this trial version to read that file from. And I will use this file, the second file, to demonstrate how it looks like now outside ARCHLine first. So you will see I will use the same free tool. It's the Solibri model viewer. I will use that to demonstrate how the content looks like, and then we will check how it looks like in ARCHLine and what I can do with that building in ARCHLine. So now the Solibri model viewer opens this up. Well, this is actually just a viewer, so I'm not able to edit it. I'm just checking the content. So what I see, I can see that this has a landscape here. There is a wall here. I can see it's actually a wall. I can see there are windows, a few objects, roof, and things like that. So this is something I should see when I open this up, when I import this into ARCHLine. So let's talk about the options, what I have when I'm willing to work with an IFC file in ARCHLine. So I received this file from a maker, and I go to File, I go to Import, and I use this IFC import. So I have three options.
What do they mean?
The first option is when this file that I received will be the basis of my future work. So this is where I start, the initial phase. Someone created something, and that's where I start off. Perhaps I'm an interior designer, so I'm just working with the internal parts and not that much with the architectural things. But I need, of course, the building itself. Or I'm a specific professional from another field, and I'm just not willing to touch the building. I can actually do that. So if we are working together on this file and I receive the building, I can move the walls, I can remove the walls, I can change the walls. So if we are collaborating as architects, we can do that as well. So this is the first option. I completely discard everything that I have and I create a new project with that content. The second one is when I'm actually merging something that you have created in a third-party software, and this will be part of my existing project. So it's kind of an import in a classic way when I extend my already existing data, my already existing building with that specific building, for example. And the third one is the IFC element. Well, an IFC element, we can consider them as objects. I think we can tell that this is mostly used for example, you find a specific sanitary ware in IFC format, or you find something for plumbing, for heating systems, or all sort of specific MEP items. You can import them and you can just store them into the library as objects, as doors, as windows, and things like that.
So this is actually the scenario that you would do if you download something from BIM Object as an IFC file, as a component, as just one single element among the millions of walls that you have created so far. So which one is the option that we are going to choose now?
Now I will go with the first one, so you will see how it looks like when I just discard what I had. I perhaps already saved it, so now I'm just quitting without saving. And then the software reads that file, which I'm selecting now, and I click OK. So the software starts reading the information. It takes a bit longer, like in case of a solid view or a single viewer, because ARCHLine actually turns them into real items that you can actually modify, not just view. So this is why it takes a little longer, but it's still very fast. You will see that the software creates the walls, the doors, the windows, the columns, the objects, even the terrain, the location, the building system. I mean, the whole floor system will be built up, which we will soon check. And then when it's done, you will see the content appearing in front of you as a drawing and as something that's connected to that as the 3D building itself.
What I'm mostly interested to see is that what kind of elements can we work with? Because you mentioned that if you export an IFC file, you would get the building data, the information stored to it, geolocation, floor structure, and also you said that certain building elements can be further edited.
Yeah.
So walls can be recognized or further worked with, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, let's see. Here, as you can see, the 3D is completely the same as before. Everything appears here, the terrain, even the kind of the cutout of the trees and other things like that. You will find that there's the 2D, a complete 2D. You will see the slabs, actually, the walls appearing, objects appearing, and those are actually real items in ARCHLine. So there's not just something that is working as a background for your future work. You can still find those, you can select those, and as you can see, those are treated as real walls. So the best way to demonstrate that, I just click on this top edge and I can change the height, just as I could do with any sort of other walls in ARCHLine. And this changes the drawing itself, it changes the 3D, and I can just go there and pick a window from ARCHLine, like for example this single casement window, select that wall, place it there, and it works exactly the same way as it was created in ARCHLine.
So the walls can be modified, and you can add further openings to it.
And
you
the
can
same
even
goes
profile
for
it.
the same goes for the slabs and other things like that.
Is this natural that every single wall can be used as such? Or is there something else?
Most of the time, yes. There are things that are specific to a specific software. Let me demonstrate that. Like I just demonstrated how you can place a door or window into an already existing wall, which came with the IFC file. So let's just repeat that. I just go there and I would like to place a new window here. We agreed, you were the designer of this building, for example, and we agreed that I will go on and I will fill it up with extra data, extra architectural items. So I click here and I place it somewhere, and it appears like it's not there, but it's half there and half not. So what happened? If I select the wall, I can see actually the window is kind of sunk into this this whole wall surface, and I can see there's no problem with this. This is actually a wall. So what's the deal here? And in some situations, like in this specific situation, the wall was modified in the original software in a way which cannot be directly converted without losing the original shape. So in this situation, the software decides to keep the shape and allows you to decide whether you would like to keep the shape or you prefer editability. And this goes with this option. So if you anytime see a situation like this, you should go for a 3D fixed option at the left hand side. If you see that, that means it was the 3D was imported, it was fixed, all the BIM data came with that wall, so everything kept. But to be able to keep the consistency of this project and the original 3D, it must be saved as the 3D here. Now, if I'm willing to edit that, let me just zoom out a little bit and look at the bottom of the wall here. If I just disable that, as you can see, the bottom of the wall jumped.
But the window is inserted at the same time.
Now the window is there. So now it's a native ARCHLine wall. So whatever was fixed with that, because you designed it in a very specific way, which that software can do, and this software has different solutions for that. So the software kept the 3D, but now I made it editable, and I can still go there and, for example, raise the, change the height and go. Well, that was the length.
That was the length.
Yeah, sorry. So I just change the height and I just match it with the original one. So, so this is how I can edit it. So it's the information is still not lost. The information is still there, but I can select what I'm willing to do with this wall, for example.
Are there any restrictions to editability?
Well, there is, for example, talking about the specific approaches, how one software approaches a problem and how the other. Let me just show you two examples. One will be an example from ARCHLine, and the first example will be, again, supporting this information. So, for example, the windows. Windows are very, very specific. The doors are also very, very specific. As you can see, now this window is an imported window. I can go into the details and I can even resize it. I can find all the details. I can change the material. But here comes the tricky point that I cannot change the basic geometry. I cannot add parameters like divisions or something like that, because this specific window, however simple it is, it was designed in another software with specific tools to draft it, to create it. And the same goes with ARCHLine. So if you create a window in ARCHLine with those specifics that you can find here, like the divisions and the thickness of the division and so on, you will see these here. But once you export that data into IFC file and someone else in a third-party software is willing to work with that, they won't see the same details, because that's an ARCHLine specific thing, and that was a third-party specific thing. The same goes, just to tell you another example, the same goes for the very specific items in ARCHLine for the interior parts, like for example the KBB cabinets. Those are things that are unique in the world, how ARCHLine creates those items. These are coming with the rich information palette with all mechanisms and things like that. Now these are obviously available only in ARCHLine and not in the other software. So when you place cabinets, the other person in the other software will be able to see the cabinets, but they don't have the options to change the divisions and so on.
So to sum up, there are three kinds of objects which come with an IFC file. The first category is the best category, because then you can modify these. You can change the heights, thicknesses, profile them, etc. Second category are those which you have to decide if you want to make the 3D unfixed and make some changes. That if you do that, you might need to adjust the elements later on. And the third category are the things which you can see and you can access the data, especially the BIM data, but you won't be able to further edit them with the same ability as they were created in the software where they were created.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. The BIM data is always kept, however the situation is, but the editability and the way you can treat them is it's various actually.
There is actually a topic which comes up regarding BIM quite frequently, and that is level of details, LODs.
Yeah.
And you might need to know how in ARCHLine we handle that. So what happens if you want to change between different representation styles, for instance? So what kind of features do we have in this regard?
Well, let's just go with multi-layered walls, because those are the most obvious things to demonstrate here. When I go to the walls, I will use these styles here. I just go with something like, let's just go with, for example, this one. As you can see, it's a very simple wall, but it has cavity in it. So I just zoom in so we can see how it is represented. It's like that.
Yes.
And then when I click on that, let me just narrow the 3D only to that item, which is very easy. You can just click on the item, and then you click on the 3D, and then it appears here on the screen. So now, whatever I do with this wall, it will be treated as a multi-layer item. Now, let me just go back to the previous project as well. So
yes,
because that already has
a few walls. Yes,
a few
we can
walls.
work with.
And I would like to also demonstrate something to create a new style. So let me just open that as well.
There's actually two things we want to talk about here. One is how to treat how walls and the wall hatches are portrayed, and the other one is how the openings are portrayed. Because depending on what kind of documentation you want to generate from that, you have to decide what kind of level of detail you want to go into in terms of documentation.
Yeah, so I'm just using the same wall. I believe this was the one, or perhaps the other one. Anyway, I just draw that, and I can see how it looks like, and I can see how it looks like in 3D. Let me just filter the 3D only to that item, that specific item, going back to extrametric view, and this is how it looks like.
Show us how do you change the representation style of the hatch patterns into the...
Now there is an option to change the representation style of this specific wall in 3D and in 2D by going here and selecting the specific representation. Like for example the course, that's kind of the conceptual level. This is the lowest LOD, the lowest level, where I cannot see details, I cannot see layers, and I cannot see layers also neither in the 3D as well. So this is the lowest level, and all going up through these settings, I can go to the fine or the fine field. Whichever I go with, I will see that appearing in the 2D and in the 3D, just as we demonstrated earlier in a specific other project, and it appears here also in the 3D.
So you can actually decide how you want to show these things. Apart from the fact that it might save computing power, it's mostly about how you want to show your project. What about openings, doors and windows?
Let's just place a window here. I'm going with this one. So it appears like that in the 2D. So talking about the level of detail, also I can change the window level of detail here. Now again, this is the lowest detail level, and this is the highest details level. So whenever I change between detail levels, the software is actually just recalculating the drawing and makes a higher resolution or a lower resolution version
depending
of that
on what you need.
Item. The software is by default set to 1 to 100, but as you can see, you can change this setting to whichever other option you would like to go with.
BIM is also about complying with regulations, but sometimes these regulations are on a country-to-country level. We know for sure that in some countries the regulation is that if a window is above or below a certain line, then it has to be showed in a certain way. Now, what are the switches to show this kind of detail?
Yeah, usually that's called the sill height that you're talking about. And now this sill height is rather high. It's about 1 meter. And in some countries it is treated as a non-visible or a semi-visible object or symbol in the 2D. And this depends on a setting in ARCHLine. As you can see in the graphics, you can actually set up all those things, how the 3D and how the 2D will be treated and how it will look like when you fill it up with details, with the patterns and so on. And also this is where you can enable this option. If your country is needing that sort of specific visualization, you can say that, okay, if an item is above 1 meter, like a specific door or window, that window should not be displayed, or it should be displayed with dashed line. Now I'm going with this one, so you will see how that looks like. So now the software actually just recalculates, it checks if there is other window or something like that. And now I can see that it disappeared from the 2D, but it still appears in the 3D. So let me just quickly give you a good idea of how to treat those sort of items. I'm just zooming in here. As you can see, whenever I click on the wall, I can just select the wall. Whenever I click on this window, I can see that it appears here, and it also appears there.
Okay, so it is there, it's just not shown.
Yeah. And one specific way to find those sort of items, if the project is large and you don't know exactly where the window should be, there is a very useful option in the 3D. You just right-click on an item and you tell the software to show you where this item is on the floor, and it finds that and it highlights that.
Perfect. One last thing to talk about here is how do you make your work standardized? So how do you create templates and styles that you can pass it to others? Because we started talking about what happens if you want to work together with others who don't use ARCHLine and use another BIM software. But what happens if they do? How can you give the amassed data to somebody else?
I think, but aside the libraries that we talked about, where everyone can reach the same data, when I create something that I would like to share with you, we are working in this office, and I created a wall with specific BIM data, BIM details. Let's just start with this one. I went to the settings and I used a specific compound wall setting with, I don't know, with a 40 wide brick wall, and there is this additional layer with air cavity, thermal insulation, and so on. And I also added specific BIM parameters here. And when I did that, I obviously do not want to redo it from time to time, and I just don't want to pass on complete projects for you to be able to use the same thing.
Correct.
So I actually can save this all sort of information with everything that I've created here into a so-called style. I can just click on the new, and let's just name it, I don't know, it's a brick cavity.
That's an extra.
Yeah, cavity wall, I don't know, 400 millimeters or something like that. It will fall into a proper folder when I do that. I can also create a subfolder, and here comes the tricky point. You can say that this is actually a local style. It's only for this specific project because it's so heavily specialized. I don't want to use it in other projects. But in many other cases, I just would like to make it kind of public on this computer, and I can just click on this option and I can say okay. So it will be created, and as you can see, it gets a specific icon, and this user icon tells me that this is actually publicly available on this computer. But you are working actually on a different computer, so there's still one step that I need to do to be able to share this with you, and that's how you can actually export not just objects or drawings or something like that, but also styles. You can just start the tool. I think this is one of the easiest ways. You just start a tool, find that specific
Yes, it was
style that you created.
that one, yes.
And you right-click there, and you have these options. You can do all sorts of things with it, and you can also, of course, export it. And it will create a new file. It's a so-called environment file. And with that environment file, you can export that into one file, copy to another computer, and import the same way.
So that's what we wanted to talk about today regarding the BIM benefits. Just to recap, BIM is something which is all around us. That's the new way of working with things. But it might happen that you are currently not pressed by your clients or your colleagues to adopt the BIM workflow. But even if that's the case, it's worth looking at what BIM is able to offer, because even for a smaller project like this one, there are tremendous amount of benefits. Mentioning one is the large amount of information which is already in BIM formats, such as the object libraries in BIM Object and Synchronia and these kind of catalogs. And also the other major benefit is the seamless collaboration with other co-designers, even if they are using another software product apart from ARCHLine. So even if, like I said, you are not pressured to use BIM, it's worth taking a look, because that gives you a tremendous amount of edge in your designing process.
That's right, that's right. That's what I wanted to say, that if you work and if you join the BIM world using a BIM software, you won't communicate drawings anymore. You will likely still do that when you would like to share only the drawing, but
yes,
you will have a much higher level communication when you actually share the building itself, and it makes life way much easier, and you can just, you know, work with the walls, and you don't have to remodel them, which you would do when you only have a 2D drawing, which we already demonstrated in the previous session.
That's right. Now let's talk about what happens next time. Now next time there's going to be a hiatus. Next week we don't have any shows because there's a holiday on the 1st of May, but on the 8th of May we'll be back with another topic which you have already heard about. ARCHLine.XP Live. We have already demonstrated what Live is able to do in terms of visualization, but now we are going one step further and show what it can do right now. And for those of you who haven't heard about Live, you are in for a surprise, because now we are going to leave the boring world of 3D design behind, and we go into architectural visualization, which is going to be a breathtaking sight. For our viewers, thank you very much for tuning in with us. Like I said, next week we don't meet, but the week after that we are going to do. If you have any questions that we should be talking about in the next shows, keep the questions and feedback coming. Thank you very much for your attention. If you like the show, like it and subscribe to it, so you would never miss another show like this again. Thank you very much for your attention.
Goodbye.
Take care.